I never believed in coincidence. In my world, everything happens for a reason, usually a violent one. So when I stepped out of the back entrance of my club at 3 a.m. and nearly tripped over a woman bleeding on my doorstep, I knew the universe was playing a sick joke. Or maybe it was karma, finally coming to collect. The rain had been falling for hours, turning the alley into a river of filth and forgotten sins. The neon sign above my club, Cane's, flickered red and blue, casting shadows that danced across the woman's broken body. She was curled into herself, dark hair matted with blood and rain. Her dress torn in ways that made my jaw clench so hard I thought my teeth might crack. "Call an ambulance," I barked at Marco, my head of security, who'd followed me out for our usual end-of-night briefing. But before he could move, the woman's hand shot out and grabbed my ankle with surprising strength for someone who looked half dead. Her eyes, Christ. Her eyes. They were wide with terror. The kind of fear I'd seen in war zones and execution rooms. But there was something else there too. Determination. She was trying to tell me something, her mouth opening and closing, but no sound came out. At first I thought she was too weak to speak, that maybe her throat was injured. Then I saw her hands moving, trembling, but deliberate. Sign language. I felt my blood run cold, then boil. I hadn't used sign language in 15 years, not since my sister Elena died. She'd been born deaf, and learning to communicate with her had been one of the few good things I'd done in my miserable life. After she was killed by a rival family, I'd buried that language along with her, swearing I'd never use it again. It hurt too much to remember. But now, watching this stranger's shaking hands form desperate shapes in the flickering light, muscle memory kicked in. She was signing 3 words over and over. Please. Help. Dangerous. Marco, forget the ambulance. Get the car. We're taking her to Dr. Chen. I crouched down, my expensive suit soaking up the dirty water pooling around us. Can you understand me? I asked, signing the words as I spoke them. The relief that flooded her face was almost painful to witness. She nodded frantically, then started signing again, faster now. They're looking. For me. Can't. Hospital. Smart girl. If someone had done this to her and she was afraid of hospitals, it meant either cops or criminals were after her. Maybe both. In my experience, there often wasn't much difference. I scooped her up carefully, trying to ignore how light she was, how broken. She couldn't have been more than 25, with delicate features that would have been beautiful if they weren't covered in bruises. As I carried her to the car, she signed against my chest, her movements growing weaker. Thank you. Didn't. No. Where else? Who did this to you? I signed back with one hand, awkward while holding her, but I needed to know. Her eyes filled with tears, and she shook her head. Not wouldn't tell. Couldn't. The fear was too fresh, too raw. I knew that look. I'd put it on enough faces in my time. Dr. Chen lived in a secure building in Chinatown, one of the many properties I owned through shell companies. He was the best underground doctor in New York, the kind who didn't ask questions and could patch up anything from a gunshot wound to a severed finger. He owed me too many favors to count, and he knew better than to refuse my call at 3:30 in the morning. The woman, I still didn't know her name, passed out in the car. Her head lolled against my shoulder, and I could feel her shallow breathing, see the bruises blooming darker on her pale skin. Marco drove in silence, occasionally glancing at me in the rearview mirror with barely concealed confusion. In 15 years of working for me, he'd never seen me show this kind of concern for anyone. Hell, I was confused myself. I should have just called 911 and washed my hands of the situation. Getting involved with a random victim was dangerous and stupid. 2 things I'd built my empire by never being. But something about the way she'd looked at me, the way her hands had formed those signs my sister used to make, had awakened something I thought I'd killed long ago. Conscience. Or maybe just memory. Dr. Chen was waiting when we arrived, his medical bag already packed. He took one look at the woman in my arms and ushered us into his private examination room, the one with no windows and reinforced walls, where he'd treated countless members of my organization over the years. "How bad?" I asked, laying her gently on the table. Chen began his examination, his practiced hands moving efficiently. "Severe contusions, possible broken ribs, evidence of strangulation. See the marks on her neck. Defensive wounds on her hands and arms. Signs of..." He paused, his face hardening. "Sexual assault, I'm afraid. She fought hard, though. There's skin under her fingernails. She marked her attacker." The rage that swept through me was so intense, I had to grip the edge of the table to keep from putting my fist through the wall. I'd done terrible things in my life. I'd killed men, ruined businesses, destroyed families. But rape? That was a line I'd never crossed, a sin I considered unforgivable. Anyone in my organization even suspected of it was dealt with permanently. It was one of the few rules I enforced absolutely, a legacy of Elena, who'd almost been attacked before I'd killed the man responsible. "Fix her up," I said quietly. Too quietly. Marco and Chen both recognized the tone. It was the voice I used before someone died. "Everything she needs. I don't care what it costs." "Killian," Chen said carefully, using my first name, which he never did. "She needs a hospital, a rape kit, proper. No hospitals, no police. Not until she wakes up and tells me what she wants." I looked down at her unconscious face, seeing the tear tracks mixed with blood. Someone hurt her badly enough that she'd rather crawl to a stranger's door than go to the authorities. That tells me everything I need to know about who we're dealing with. Chen nodded slowly, understanding. In our world, sometimes the police were more dangerous than the criminals. I stayed while he worked, watching as he cleaned and stitched, set and bandaged. She didn't wake, even when he had to reset what turned out to be 3 broken ribs. Chen gave her something for the pain, antibiotics to prevent infection, and a sedative to help her rest. "She'll be out for hours," he said, stripping off his gloves. "She needs bed rest, proper nutrition, and probably therapy. But physically, she'll heal. The psychological trauma." He shook his head. "That's beyond my expertise." After Chen left, I pulled up a chair beside the examination table and just looked at her. In the harsh fluorescent light, I could see more details. The calluses on her fingers, the dirt under her broken nails, the way her hands, even in sleep, seemed to be forming shapes. There was something delicate about her, something that reminded me painfully of Elena. Not the way she looked, but the vulnerability, the innocence that my world had tried to crush. "Who are you?" I asked the sleeping woman. "And what the hell am I going to do with you?" My phone buzzed. Marco, texting from the waiting room. "Vinny wants to know if you're coming to the meeting with the Italians tomorrow." Tomorrow. I'd forgotten. A sit-down with the Rossi family to discuss territory disputes. Important, dangerous, the kind of meeting that could go sideways if I wasn't focused. But looking at this broken woman, I couldn't bring myself to care about territory or meetings or any of the bullshit that usually consumed my life. I texted back, "Postpone it. Something came up." Marco's response was immediate. "Everything okay, boss?" Was it? I didn't know. What I did know was that the moment this woman's hand had grabbed my ankle, the moment I'd seen those signs, something had shifted. A door I'd sealed shut 15 years ago had cracked open, and I couldn't close it again even if I wanted to. "No," I signed to the sleeping woman, knowing she couldn't see. "Nothing's okay, but I'm going to make whoever did this to you regret they were ever born." It was a promise, and Killian Kane never broke his promises, especially the violent ones. She woke at dawn, and I watched fear flood her features before recognition smoothed them into something more complicated. I'd moved her to one of the safe apartments I kept in the building, a comfortable space that didn't look like a prison, even though it had the same level of security. I'd sat in the chair by the window all night, my gun on my lap, watching her sleep and thinking about revenge. Her hand moved to her throat, touching the bruises there, then traveled to her ribs. I saw the wince, the careful way she tested her body's damage. Then her eyes found me, really found me, and I saw the question there. "You're safe," I said, signing as I spoke. "No one knows you're here except me and 2 men I trust with my life. The doctor said you'll heal completely given time." She blinked rapidly, processing. Then her hands moved slowly, each sign deliberate despite obvious pain. "Why did you help me?" It was a good question. I'd been asking myself the same thing all night. The truth was complicated, tied up in guilt and grief and a sister's ghost that haunted me more than any of the men I'd killed. But I gave her a simpler answer. Because you asked me to, and because anyone who does what was done to you deserves to die. I kept my voice even, matter of fact. "Do you remember what happened?" Her face shuddered immediately, fear replacing curiosity. She shook her head violently, then flinched at the movement. "Easy," I said, raising my hands in what I hoped was a calming gesture. "You don't have to talk about it now, or ever, if you don't want to. But I need to know one thing. Are you in danger right now? Is someone looking for you?" She hesitated, then nodded. Her hands trembled as she signed. "They don't know. Name. Saw. Face. Only. But. Will. Look. Who are they?" Another head shake, this one slower, more thoughtful. Then she spelled out, DONTKNOWNAMES. "But you could identify them?" A nod. "Good." I stood, moving to the window to look out at the city waking up below us. "Then here's what's going to happen. You're going to stay here, where no one can find you. You're going to heal. And when you're ready, only when you're ready, you're going to tell me everything. And then I'm going to make sure they never hurt anyone again." I turned back to face her and saw something unexpected in her expression. Disbelief. She signed rapidly, angrily now, despite the pain it clearly caused. "Why? Care, you, don't, know, me, I'm, nobody." The words hit harder than they should have. I'd thought the same thing about myself most of my life. Nobody. Just another violent man in a violent world. But Elena had never seen me that way, and maybe that's why this woman's words stung. "You're not nobody," I signed back, moving closer to the bed. "You're someone who fought back. Someone strong enough to survive and smart enough to find help. That's not nobody." Tears spilled down her cheeks, and I felt something crack in my chest. I'd seen plenty of people cry, usually right before I killed them. But this was different. This was grief and relief and pain all mixed together. The kind of tears that came from someone who'd held themselves together through hell and could finally let go. I did something I'd never done before. I sat on the edge of the bed and let her cry, her hands clutching my shirt while her body shook with silent sobs. I didn't tell her it would be okay. I didn't deal in comforting lies. I just sat there, solid and present, until the storm passed. When she finally pulled back, embarrassed, wiping at her face, I handed her a tissue from the nightstand. She took it, then looked at me with red-rimmed eyes and signed. "Name. My name is Kara." "Kara," I repeated out loud, liking the way it sounded. "I'm Killian Kane." Her eyes widened slightly. She knew the name. Everyone in New York who paid any attention to the underbelly of the city knew Kane. I waited for the fear to return, for her to recoil from the monster she'd unwittingly asked for help. Instead, she just looked tired. "No. Who? You? Are," she signed. "Don't. Care. Saved. Me. Fair enough. In her situation, a mob boss was probably the least of her worries. Over the next few days, I learned Kara's language better than I'd known Elena's. Necessity drove me. I needed to communicate with her, to understand her, and she couldn't speak. But it was more than that. There was something intimate about signing, about the way we had to watch each other's hands, maintain eye contact, be fully present. In a world where I trusted no one and let even fewer people close, this forced intimacy was unsettling and addictive. I learned she was 24, that she'd been born mute due to complications at birth, that she worked at a flower shop in the village called Bloom. I learned she lived alone in a small apartment in Queens, that her parents had died when she was 19, that she had no siblings, no close friends, just an isolated life revolving around flowers and silence. I learned she was kind, despite everything she'd been through, despite knowing who I was. She worried about the doctor who'd treated her, asked if I'd thanked him properly, insisted on writing him a note of gratitude that I had delivered. She apologized for the trouble she was causing, as if being brutally attacked was somehow her fault. And I learned she was strong. Stronger than most of the men who worked for me. She never complained about the pain, never asked for more medication than she needed, pushed herself to heal faster than Chen recommended. When I told her she needed to rest, she'd shake her head stubbornly and sign, weak, means, victim, not weak anymore. On the 4th day, I came back from a meeting to find her out of bed, standing at the window looking out at the city. She'd showered and changed into clothes I'd had one of my female associates buy. Simple jeans and a soft sweater that somehow made her look younger and more vulnerable than the hospital gown she'd been wearing. "You should be resting," I said, and signed. She turned to me and I saw something different in her expression. Determination. Resolution. Her hands moved with the deliberation that I'd learned meant she was about to say something important. Ready to tell you everything. I'd been waiting for this, preparing for it. I had my notebook ready, my laptop set up to take notes. But seeing the pain in her eyes, I realized this wasn't going to be the clinical debriefing I'd imagined. This was going to cost her something. "Are you sure?" I asked. She nodded, then moved to sit on the couch. I sat across from her, giving her space, and waited. Her hands began to move, slowly at first, then faster as the story poured out. She'd been closing the flower shop late, later than usual because of a big wedding order she'd been preparing. A man had come in just before she locked the door. White, maybe 35, expensive suit, polite smile. He'd asked about roses, seemed normal, charming even. She'd relaxed, shown him different arrangements, turned her back to get samples from the cooler. That's when he'd grabbed her. I watched her hands shake as she described the knife he'd pressed to her throat, the way he'd whispered terrible things in her ear, even though she couldn't hear them. She'd felt his breath, read his lips in the reflection of the cooler's glass door. He'd dragged her to the back room, and she'd fought. God, she'd fought so hard. The defensive wounds Chen had mentioned were testament to that. But he'd been stronger, and he'd had the knife. And eventually, her hand stopped moving. She looked at me, and I saw she couldn't finish. Didn't need to. I understood. "How did you get away?" I signed. She touched her throat again, that gesture I was beginning to recognize as a nervous habit. Delivery. Man. Came. Late. He. Ran. I. Ran. Too. But he. Followed. Saw. Me. Get. On. Subway. Got. Off. Near. Your club. Saw. Sign. Security. Cameras. Thought. He. Wouldn't. Follow. There. And he didn't. No. But he. Saw. Direction. I. Went. He's. Looking. Did you see his face clearly? Could you identify him? She nodded, then did something that surprised me. She pulled out a folded piece of paper from her pocket. When had she gotten paper? And handed it to me. On it was a sketch, crude, but detailed enough to be useful. The man from her description, captured in pencil with an artist's eye for detail. You drew this? Used to draw before flowers. She shrugged, a gesture that said so much about abandoned dreams and practical necessity. I studied the face. He looked like 1,000 other entitled assholes in expensive suits who thought money and power put them above the law. And maybe he was right, in the normal world. But he'd made the mistake of hurting someone under my protection now, and in my world, there was no law, except the one I made. I'll find him, I promised. And when I do, he'll wish he'd never been born. Kara's hands moved quickly. No, kill, just stop from hurting others. I almost smiled. Even after everything, she had mercy in her. It would have been admirable if it wasn't so naive. Kara, men like this don't stop. They escalate. If I just stop him, he'll do it again to someone else. Maybe someone who isn't strong enough to fight back. Maybe someone who doesn't survive. She stared at me for a long moment, and I could see the conflict playing out behind her eyes. The moral person she'd been raised to be warring with the victim who knew what monsters looked like. Finally, her hands moved slowly. Whatever you think is right. It wasn't permission, not exactly. But it wasn't a protest either. It was surrender to reality, the kind of ugly compromise that my world demanded from everyone who entered it. I took the drawing and called Marco in. Run this through our contacts. Check with Vice, with our people who work the clubs, with anyone who might recognize this face. I want a name and an address by tomorrow. What did he do? Marco asked, looking at the drawing. What do you think? I said quietly. Marco's expression hardened. He had daughters. I'll have it by tonight. After he left, Kara signed to me. How long do I stay here? As long as you need to, as long as you want to. Have to work, pay, rent, boss, will, fire, me. Already taken care of. I bought the flower shop. You still have a job whenever you're ready to go back. Your rent's paid for the next year. You can focus on healing. Her mouth dropped open. She stared at me like I'd sprouted a second head, then signed frantically. Can't. Accept to. Much. Don't. Even. No. You. You're right. You don't know me. I leaned forward, making sure she could see my face clearly, read every expression. You don't know that I've killed men, that I run half the illegal operations in this city, that I'm exactly the kind of monster your mother probably warned you about. But you also don't know that I watched my sister die, because I wasn't there to protect her. That I've spent 15 years making sure I'm powerful enough that I never feel that helpless again. And that right now, keeping you safe is the first thing that's mattered to me in longer than I can remember. The words hung between us, more honest than I'd been with anyone in years. Kara just looked at me, her dark eyes seeing too much, understanding too much. Then her hands moved, gentle and certain. You're not monster, wouldn't, learn, sign, language, for, dead, sister, wouldn't, sit, beside, strangers, bed, all, night, wouldn't, cry, when, he, thought, I was sleeping. I froze. I hadn't thought she'd noticed the tears that had escaped in the darkest hours of that first night, when watching her broken body had brought back every memory of Elena's funeral. I'm not a good man, Kara. Maybe. Not. But you're good to me. That's enough. And somehow, in that moment, with her hands forming words of forgiveness I didn't deserve, I felt something I hadn't felt in 15 years. Hope. Marco had the name by midnight. Richard Ashford, senior partner at a prestigious law firm in Midtown. Married, 2 kids in private school, brownstone in Park Slope, weekend house in the Hamptons. the perfect picture of success and respectability, which meant he had everything to lose and thought himself untouchable. "He's got connections," Marco said, laying out the file on my desk. "His father-in-law is Judge Morrison. His firm represents half the real estate developers in Manhattan, including some who've done business with us. This isn't going to be clean." "I don't care if his father-in-law is the Pope," I said, studying Ashford's photo, the same face from Kara's sketch, smiling confidently at some charity gala. "He hurt someone under my protection. That's a death sentence." "The flower girl means that much to you?" I looked up sharply, and Marco raised his hands in surrender. "Not judging, boss. Just trying to understand the play here. This could get messy politically." He was right. Going after someone like Ashford would draw attention, the kind I usually avoided. But the thought of him walking free, of him seeing Kara's face on the news if she reported the attack, of him using his connections to make it all disappear while she lived in fear, that was unacceptable. "Set up surveillance. I want to know his routine, his weaknesses, where he goes, who he sees. And I want to know if Kara was the first." "You think there are others? Men like this?" "There are always others." Over the next week, while Kara healed in the safe apartment, I threw my organization's resources into investigating Richard Ashford. What we found made me want to break my rule about slow deaths. 4 other women, all young, all vulnerable, all with stories suspiciously similar to Kara's. 2 had reported it to the police. Both cases were dropped due to insufficient evidence. One had sued civilly and settled out of court with a non-disclosure agreement. One had simply disappeared, moved across the country, changed her name, left no forwarding address. And those were just the ones we could confirm. How many others had been too scared or too ashamed to come forward? I brought the information to Kara one evening. She'd been getting stronger every day, moving more easily, though I could still see pain flicker across her face when she thought I wasn't looking. She'd taken to helping prepare dinner. Simple things at first, then more complex meals as her ribs healed. I'd protested, said she should rest, but she'd signed stubbornly. Sitting makes me think. Thinking hurts more than ribs. I understood that. Action was better than memory. Now, watching her read through the file on Ashford's other victims, I saw her hands start to shake. Not from weakness this time, but from rage. When she looked up at me, her eyes were fierce. "Stop. Him," she signed. "Whatever it takes. Are you sure? Once I do this, there's no taking it back." "Good. He deserves no take backs." I nodded slowly. "There's something else." One of the victims, Sarah Chen, the doctor's niece. She'd be willing to testify if we could guarantee her protection. With your testimony and hers, maybe others would come forward. We could put him away legally. Kara shook her head immediately. Court means he sees me again, means lawyers, questions, means everyone knows my shame. It's not your shame, Kara. It's his. No, that, here. She pointed to her head. But here. She touched her chest over her heart. Still feels like mine. I understood that too. Victims often carried the weight of their attackers' sins. It was one of the cruelest aspects of crimes like these. The way they stole not just safety but dignity. Made survivors feel guilty for the evil done to them. Okay. Then we do it my way. Will it be quick? Her hands moved hesitantly, as if she was afraid to ask. His death? Do you want it to be? She thought about this for a long moment, her fingers still, her face distant. I could see her reliving it, feeling his hands on her, his breath, his violence. When her eyes refocused on me, they were hard. No, Good, because I'd been planning to take my time anyway. But before I could move on Ashford, something unexpected happened. Kara asked to go back to the flower shop. Not to work. Yet, she signed when I started to protest. Just to see it, to remember it was mine before he made it his. I'll take you. We went at dawn, when the streets were mostly empty and the risk of being seen was minimal. I'd had the shop professionally cleaned after the attack, all traces of violence erased, but I could still see Kara tense as we approached. Her hand found mine without thinking, squeezing tight, and I let her hold on. Inside, the shop looked peaceful in the early light. Flowers in various stages of bloom filled the space with color and that particular green, living smell I'd never paid attention to before. Kara moved through the space slowly, touching displays, adjusting stems with the practiced care of someone who loved their work. She stopped at the cooler, the one where it had happened, and I saw her shoulders square. She opened it, stepped inside, stood there for a long moment. When she came out, her eyes were wet, but her jaw was set. Okay, now, it's mine, again. We stayed for an hour. She showed me how to arrange flowers, the technical aspects of it, the artistry. I was terrible at it, my large, scarred hands clumsy with the delicate stems. But she laughed silently at my attempts, her body shaking with mirth. And I realized it was the first time I'd seen her come close to joy since the attack. "You're mocking me," I signed, pretending to be offended. "Little bit." Her eyes sparkled. Big, scary, mob, boss, defeated, by daisies. Those are carnations. Makes it worse. I smiled despite myself. In another life, in another world, this might have been a date, early morning, flowers, gentle teasing. But this wasn't another life. This was mine, and I was about to commit murder. "Kara," I signed, suddenly serious. "After I deal with Ashford, things might change. People might ask questions. The police might come around. I need you to be prepared for that. Will you get caught? No. But they might suspect. It's important that you don't know anything. That you never saw me, never stayed with me, never told me about him. Can you do that?" She looked at me for a long time, and I could see her processing what I was asking. To lie to the police, to deny our connection, to pretend the last 2 weeks hadn't happened. It was a lot to ask of someone as honest as her. Will lying keep you safe? Yes, then I can lie. Something in my chest tightened. She was willing to perjure herself to protect me, this woman I'd known for 2 weeks, this innocent, who should have run screaming from my world the moment she learned who I was. Instead, she stood in her flower shop at dawn and promised to lie for me. I should have sent her away then. Should have paid for a few months in a safe location out of state, given her enough money to start over, and cut all ties. It would have been the smart thing to do, the safe thing for both of us. But I didn't want to be smart. I wanted to keep her close, to watch her heal, to learn more of her language and teach her more of mine. "Thank you," I signed. "No, thank you for giving me back my flowers and for making monster pay." That night, I went hunting. Richard Ashford left his office at 8:30, which was actually early for him according to our surveillance. He walked 3 blocks to his usual parking garage, whistling, checking his phone, completely unaware. Arrogance and entitlement had made him sloppy. He assumed he was untouchable. He was wrong. We took him in the garage. Quick, professional, no witnesses. A cloth over his face, a needle in his arm, and he was asleep before he could scream. Marco and I loaded him into a van marked with the logo of a plumbing company. Just another service vehicle in the city. No one looked twice. We drove to one of my warehouses by the docks, a place so soundproof you could fire a cannon and the building next door wouldn't hear it. I'd used it many times over the years for similar purposes. The walls were stained with old sins. When Ashford woke up, he was zip-tied to a chair in the center of the empty space, a single light bulb swinging above him. Cliché, maybe, but effective. He blinked, confused, then terrified as he saw me standing in front of him. What is this? Do you know who I am? Richard Ashford, 42 years old, senior partner at Ashford, Marks & Chen, married to Elizabeth Morrison Ashford, father of 2, respected member of the community. I circled him slowly. Also a rapist, a predator, a man who uses his power to hurt vulnerable women. His face went white. I don't know what you're talking about. This is a mistake. You attacked a woman 2 weeks ago, a florist. She couldn't scream because she's mute, which probably made it easier for you. Did you think she wouldn't tell anyone? Did you think there'd be no consequences? I didn't. I never. He was sweating now, his expensive suit darkening under the arms. Look, if someone said I did something, they're lying. I can prove where I was. I pulled out my phone and showed him Kara's sketch. She drew this. From memory, while she was recovering from 3 broken ribs, severe bruising, and vaginal tearing. My voice stayed calm, conversational even, but inside I was burning. Want to tell me again that she's lying? Ashford's mouth opened and closed like a fish. I could see him calculating, trying to find the angle that would save him. I can pay. Whatever you want. I have money, connections. Name your price. You think this is about money? Everything's about money. Or power. Which one do you want? I leaned in close enough to smell his fear sweat. I want you to understand something. That woman you hurt? She's under my protection now, which means you hurt what's mine, and I don't forgive that. Wait, please, I have kids. So, did the woman you made disappear to California? She had a 3-year-old daughter. Did you think about that when you were threatening her? His face told me he hadn't. Of course he hadn't. Men like Ashford never thought about their victims as real people with real lives. What happened next took hours. I won't detail it, not because I'm ashamed, but because some things don't need to be relived in words. Sufficient to say that Richard Ashford learned exactly what his victims had felt. Fear, helplessness, pain, the horrible understanding that no one was coming to save him. When it was over, when he was finally dead, I felt nothing. No satisfaction, no relief, no remorse. Just the cold certainty that the world was slightly safer without him in it. Marco and I disposed of the body the way we'd disposed of dozens before, efficiently, thoroughly, leaving no trace. Richard Ashford would become another missing person statistic, another unsolved case. His family would mourn. The newspapers would speculate. And eventually, life would go on without him. It was dawn again when I got back to the apartment. I'd showered and changed at another safe house, burning the clothes I'd worn, but I still felt dirty. I always did after a kill, no matter how justified. Kara was awake, sitting on the couch with tea. She looked at me and knew immediately. Her hands moved. Is it done? I nodded. Did he suffer? Yes. Good. She set down her tea and moved closer to me. Are you okay? The question surprised me. No one ever asked if I was okay after a hit. It was just business, just part of the job. But Kara was looking at me with genuine concern, as if she cared about the toll it took. I'm fine. It's not the first time I stopped, unsure how to explain my world to someone like her. Killed. Someone? Her hands completed the thought. No. What? You are. Remember? Don't care. You did this for me. That matters. I did it for justice. Same thing. Sometimes. She reached out and took my hand, and I let her. We sat there in the growing light, her small hand in my scarred one, and I felt something shift. Not forgiveness. I didn't deserve that. But acceptance, maybe. Understanding. I should send you away, I signed with my free hand. This is dangerous. My life is dangerous. You deserve better. Maybe, but this, where I am, this, where I choose, stay. Why? She smiled, small and sad and knowing. Because you see me, not disability, not victim, not broken thing, just me. God help me. I understood exactly what she meant. She saw me too. Not the monster, not the killer, not the crime boss, just Killian, the man who'd learned sign language for his sister and cried over strangers and tried to protect people he barely knew. Okay, I signed. Stay. As long as you want. Careful. Might. Be. Forever. I should have laughed it off, made a joke, backed away from the intimacy of that statement. Instead, I pulled her closer and signed against her hair where she couldn't see. Promise? She couldn't hear me, couldn't see the sign. But somehow, I think she knew anyway. 2 months passed. Ashford's disappearance made the news for a week, then faded into the background noise of the city's endless drama. The police investigated, interviewed his colleagues and family, but found nothing. I'd made sure of that. His other victims stayed silent, either afraid to come forward or relieved that he was gone. I understood both reactions. Kara moved back to her apartment in Queens, but came to the flower shop every day, slowly rebuilding her confidence in the space that had been violated. I found excuses to stop by, ordering arrangements for the club, pretending I needed advice on what to send to business associates, claiming an interest in gardening that made her eyes sparkle with amused disbelief. You, kill, cacti, she signed one afternoon, looking at the sad, browning succulent I'd brought in for her advice. How is that possible? I'm gifted, I signed back. At death, not life. It should have stung. But she was smiling, and I realized we'd developed a shorthand, a way of joking about the darkness in my life without pretending it didn't exist. She never asked about my business, never wanted details about the violence that was part of my daily reality. But she acknowledged it existed, accepted it as part of who I was, and somehow still wanted me around. My men noticed. Marco commented on it first, carefully, during a meeting about a shipment that had been intercepted by the feds. You're distracted, boss. 3 times this week you've left meetings early to check on something. We both know what you're checking on. My personal life is not your concern. It is when it affects business. And it is when the woman making you soft is a civilian who could be used against you. He was right, and I knew it. In my world, caring about someone was a weakness, a vulnerability that enemies could exploit. The smart thing would be to cut ties, to ensure Kara's safety by staying away from her. But I couldn't make myself do it. Instead, I increased security around her. Cameras watching her apartment building, her shop, the streets she walked. Guards disguised as delivery men, dog walkers, taxi drivers. She never knew, and I made sure it stayed that way. She valued her independence too much to accept overt protection, but I couldn't rest easy without knowing she was safe. I also started teaching her about my world, in oblique ways. Self-defense moves disguised as stretching exercises to help her ribs heal. Situational awareness framed as people-watching games. How to recognize danger signs, escape routes, when to fight and when to run. She absorbed it all with a focus that reminded me of soldiers I'd known. People who understood that survival required preparation. Why are you teaching me this? She asked one evening after I'd shown her how to break free from a wrist grab. Because knowledge is power. Because I can't always be there. Because you deserve to never feel helpless again. She studied my face for a long moment, then signed. You were helpless once with your sister. It wasn't a question. Somehow she'd pieced together the story I'd never fully told her. How Elena had been killed while I was out of the country on business. How I'd gotten the call too late. How I'd held her body and promised myself I'd never be that powerless again. Yes, I admitted. And I've spent 15 years making sure I'm never in that position again. But it's not just about power, Kara. It's about the weight of not being able to save someone you care about. That weight never goes away. You saved me. I found you after. That's not the same thing. Close enough. Her hands moved gently, certainly. You can't prevent all bad things. No one can. But you can be there after that matters too. I wanted to believe her. God, I wanted to believe that being there after was enough, that I didn't have to prevent every possible harm to atone for failing Elena. But guilt doesn't work that way. It burrows deep and makes demands that can never quite be met. That night, I had the dream again. The one where I'm running through endless corridors trying to reach Elena, hearing her scream but never finding her, always arriving too late to the room where her body lies. I woke in a cold sweat, reaching for the gun I kept under my pillow, my heart hammering. My phone buzzed. A text from Kara. Can't sleep either. Want company? I stared at the message. It was 3 a.m. She lived 40 minutes away. I should have told her to get some rest, that I was fine, that she shouldn't come to my place in the middle of the night. Instead, I typed, yes. She arrived 30 minutes later. She must have left immediately, taken a cab that probably cost more than she made in a day. I opened the door to find her in pajama pants and an oversized sweater. Her hair messy, no makeup, looking more beautiful than anyone had a right to at 3:30 a.m. Nightmare, she signed. How did you know? Had. 1, 2. Thought. Maybe. We. Could. Have. Insomnia. Together. I let her in, and we sat on my couch in the dim light from the city outside. She didn't ask about the dream, and I didn't ask about hers. Instead, we just sat there in companionable silence, the kind that's only comfortable when you're with someone who understands that sometimes there are no words, signed or spoken, for what you're feeling. After a while, she signed, tell me about your sister. And I did. I told her about Elena, how she'd been fearless despite being deaf in a hearing world, how she'd made everyone around her learn at least basic signs, how she'd had this laugh that was completely silent, but somehow the most joyful sound I'd ever witnessed. I told her about teaching Elena to ride a bike, about her terrible jokes that only worked in sign language, about how she'd been planning to go to college for art before she was killed. She sounds amazing, Kara signed when I finished. She was. She deserved better than me for a brother. Better than to die because of my choices. Not your fault. It was, though. She was killed by a rival family trying to get to me. If I hadn't been in this life, if I'd been a normal person with a normal job. Kara put her hand over mine, stopping my signs. You can't live in if that way is madness. Only matters what you do now, who you are now. And who am I now? She took her time answering, her fingers forming each sign with deliberate care. Man who saved me. Man who learned language of silence. Man who carries too much guilt, but is still good underneath. I'm not good, Kara. I've done terrible things. Good and bad are not simple. Person can be both. You are both. It was the kind of moral complexity I'd spent my whole life avoiding. In my world, You were either predator or prey, strong or weak, alive or dead. But Kara was offering a third way, the messy middle ground where people were complicated and contradictory and still worthy of compassion. How do you do that? I asked. See the good in people who don't deserve it? Maybe you do deserve it. Maybe you just don't know yet. She fell asleep on my couch that night, curled up under a blanket I'd given her, looking peaceful in a way I'd never seen her before. I sat in the chair across from her and watched her breathe, this woman who'd crashed into my life covered in blood and fear and somehow become the most important person in my world. I was in love with her. The realization hit me like a physical blow, undeniable and terrifying. I'd spent 15 years carefully not caring about anyone, not letting anyone close enough to hurt me or be hurt by my choices. And then Kara had shown up on my doorstep, silent and broken, and destroyed every defense I'd built. This was dangerous. This was stupid. This was going to end badly. It always did when people from my world tried to connect with civilians. I should wake her up and send her home. I should end this before it became something that could destroy us both. Instead, I got a second blanket and draped it over her, making sure she was warm. Then I went back to my chair and kept watch, the way I had that first night in Dr. Chen's office. Protecting her had become as natural as breathing, and just as necessary. When dawn broke, Kara stirred and opened her eyes. For a moment she looked confused, then she saw me and smiled. You watched me sleep again. That's creepy. Or protective, I signed. Creepy. But I like it. Anyway. She sat up stretching, and I saw her wince slightly. Her ribs were mostly healed now, but she still had moments of pain. I wanted to ask if she needed medication, if she'd eaten, if she was really okay. But she'd told me weeks ago that she didn't want to be treated like a victim anymore, so I just signed, coffee, please, and real food, you only have protein, bars, and whiskey. That's food. That's bachelor sadness. She made breakfast while I did work on my laptop, answering emails about various business concerns that seemed trivial compared to the woman making omelets in my kitchen. We'd fallen into this routine over the past few weeks. Comfortable domesticity that should have felt strange, but somehow didn't. She was teaching me to be human again, one meal at a time. I have a meeting today, I said as we ate. Business thing. Might run late. Dangerous? I considered lying, but she'd know. She always knew. Potentially. We're negotiating territory with a family that's been pushing boundaries. Could go smoothly or could get messy. Be careful. Her hands moved seriously with real concern. World needs you in it. The world would probably be better without me. My world wouldn't be. The simple honesty of it hit me harder than any declaration of love could have. She wasn't romanticizing me or my life. She knew what I was, what I did. And still, she wanted me in her world. Kara, I started, then stopped, unsure how to say what I needed to say. If something happens to me, don't. You need to know that I've made arrangements. There's money set aside in an account for you, papers in a safe deposit box that Marco knows about. The flower shop is in your name, fully paid. You'll be taken care of. Said, don't. Her hands were sharp now, angry. Don't talk like you're dying. Don't make plans for after you. Just come back. I always come back. Promise? I shouldn't have. In my line of work, promises like that were lies waiting to happen. But looking at her face, seeing the fear she was trying to hide, I couldn't help myself. Promise. The meeting that afternoon was at a restaurant in Little Italy, neutral ground where both sides agreed to leave weapons at the door. The Rossetti family wanted to expand their gambling operations into territory I controlled in Brooklyn. I wanted access to their shipping routes for some merchandise that couldn't go through legitimate channels. It should have been a simple negotiation. It wasn't. The problem was Vincent Rossetti, the old man's grandson and heir apparent. He was young, arrogant, and thought he could intimidate his way to a better deal. When I held firm on my terms, he got aggressive. "You're getting soft, Kane," he said, loud enough for the whole restaurant to hear. "Word is you're spending time with some deaf girl playing house. That's not the Killian Kane who used to run this city." I kept my expression neutral, but inside I was calculating how quickly I could kill him and how many of his men I'd have to go through to do it. Marco, sitting beside me, tensed imperceptibly. "My personal life is not up for discussion," I said quietly. "It is when it becomes our problem. See, soft men make mistakes, and mistakes in our business get people killed." Vincent leaned forward, smiling like he'd already won. "Maybe we need to renegotiate. Maybe your territory is worth less now that you're distracted." "Or maybe," I said, still quiet, but with an edge that made Vincent's smile falter, "you need to remember who you're talking to. I've been in this business since you were in diapers. I've survived 3 attempted coups, 2 wars with rival families, and more betrayals than you've had birthdays. And you think I'm soft because I have someone in my life?" I stood up slowly, and everyone in the room tensed. "Let me make something very clear. My personal life makes me more dangerous, not less. Because now I have something to protect, and I will burn this entire city down before I let anyone threaten what's mine. Are we clear?" Vincent tried to hold my gaze, failed, looked away. His father, old man Rossetti, had been watching the exchange with interest. Now he spoke up for the first time. "My grandson forgets his manners," he said, his voice carrying the weight of decades in the life. "Forgive him. We accept your terms, Kane. And we'll make sure everyone knows that you and yours are off limits." It was as close to an apology as men like us gave. I nodded, accepting it, and the meeting continued without further incident. But as I left, I knew things had changed. My enemies now knew about Kara, which meant she was no longer just a civilian I was helping. She was a target. I went straight from the meeting to her flower shop. She was helping a customer pick out roses, her hands moving gracefully as she explained the different varieties in a notebook. She looked so normal, so far removed from my world of violence and threats. The customer left, and she turned to me with a smile that faded when she saw my expression. "What happened?" I told her. All of it. How they knew about her now. How that made her vulnerable. How I couldn't protect her if she didn't know what we were up against. She listened without interrupting, her face growing paler with each sign. When I finished, she was quiet for a long moment. Then her hands moved, shaking slightly. "Do I need to leave? Go? Away?" "That would be safest. I can set you up somewhere new. Somewhere they'd never find you. New identity, new life, everything you need." "Without you? Yes. No. Kara, be reasonable. No." She signed it harder, more emphatically. "Already. Lost. Everything. Once. Started. Over. Built. New. Life. Here. Not. Leaving. Again. Not. Leaving. You. This isn't romantic, Kara. This is life and death. These people don't play games. If they want to hurt me, the easiest way is through you. Then, teach me, protect myself, make me harder target, but don't ask me, leave." I wanted to argue, to make her see reason, to do what was smart instead of what I wanted. But looking at her determined face, I knew I couldn't. She'd made her choice, and I had to respect it, even if it terrified me. "Okay," I signed finally. "But things change starting now. Increased security, self-defense training, protocols for emergencies. And you have to promise me that if I tell you to run, you run. No arguments, no hesitation. You run and you don't look back. Only if you run too. That's not how it works. Then, no deal. She crossed her arms, stubborn. We, both, safe, or neither, safe, choose. She was going to be the death of me. Or more likely, I was going to be the death of her, which was exactly what I was trying to prevent. But I also knew I'd already lost this argument. Both safe, I agreed. But you have to trust me to know what that means sometimes. Always. Trusted. You. Since. First. Night. Why? Stop. Now? Because the stakes are higher now, I thought. Because it's one thing to save a stranger and another to protect someone you love. Because losing you would break me in ways that even Elena's death didn't. But I didn't sign any of that. Instead, I just pulled her close and held her, feeling her heart beat against my chest, steady and strong and alive. And I made a silent promise to every god I didn't believe in that I would keep her that way. The attack came 3 weeks later, at the flower shop, on a Thursday afternoon when the spring light was golden and warm. Kara was alone. I'd had to attend a meeting across town, and though I'd left guards posted nearby, they were meant to be invisible, unobtrusive. That's why they didn't see the man enter through the back door until it was too late. He wasn't one of Rossetti's men. That would have been almost professional, clean. This was something worse, a junkie looking for quick cash, high on something that made him twitchy and mean. He'd broken in through the back, where Kara kept supplies, and come through to the main shop with a knife and wild eyes. Kara, arranging tulips at the front counter, didn't hear him approach. Couldn't hear him demand money. Couldn't hear him getting agitated when she didn't respond. But she felt the hand that grabbed her shoulder and spun her around, saw the knife, recognized the danger. Everything I'd taught her kicked in. She didn't freeze. She didn't try to reason with him. She couldn't anyway. She just reacted. A hard stomp to his instep, an elbow to his solar plexus, a pivot away from the knife that brought her within reach of the heavy vase on the counter. She swung it with both hands, connecting with his temple, and he went down hard. My guards burst in 30 seconds later, responding to the silent alarm she'd triggered with her foot under the counter, another thing I'd insisted on installing. They found Kara standing over an unconscious junkie, the broken vase in her hands, her face pale but composed. I got the call 5 minutes after that and broke every traffic law getting there. When I burst through the door, ready for war, I found Kara calmly giving a statement to the police, writing it down since they hadn't thought to bring an interpreter, while the junkie was being loaded into an ambulance with a concussion. She saw me and her composure cracked. Not much, just enough for me to see the fear underneath the control. I went to her immediately, ignoring the cops, and she fell into my arms shaking. I'm okay. She signed against my chest where the cops couldn't see. Did what you taught me. It worked. You did perfectly, I signed back, then added out loud for the officers. I'm her employer. Is she free to go? The cops, young, clearly out of their depth with a deaf victim and a man who looked like I did, nodded quickly. We'll need a formal statement later, but she can leave. She was clearly defending herself. The guy's got a record as long as my arm. I took Kara home. Not to her apartment. To mine. She didn't argue, just sat quietly in the car, occasionally signing, I'm okay, like she was trying to convince herself as much as me. But I could see the tremble in her hands, the too bright look in her eyes that meant shock was setting in. At my apartment, I ran her a bath, made her tea she didn't drink, wrapped her in blankets even though it wasn't cold. And then I just held her while the adrenaline wore off, and the reality of what had almost happened hit her. She cried, finally, silent tears that shook her whole body. And I held her and signed into her hair where she couldn't see. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I should have been there. I should have protected you better. When she finally pulled back, her face was blotchy and her eyes were red, but there was something fierce in her expression. No, not your fault. You made me strong enough to protect myself. That's what matters. You shouldn't have to be strong enough. You should be safe. No one is ever completely safe. You know that better than anyone. Her hands moved with certainty despite the lingering tremor. What you gave me is better than safety. You gave me power to fight back. That's everything. I understood what she meant. Safety was an illusion, a comfortable lie we told ourselves. But power, the ability to defend yourself, to not be helpless, that was real. That was what I'd been trying to give her all along, even if I'd framed it as protection. I was so scared, I admitted, signing it before I could stop myself. When I got the call, when I didn't know if you were hurt. But I wasn't. I'm here. I'm okay. This time, but next time, we'll fight again and again and again until it becomes easier, until I'm not afraid anymore. She was right, but that didn't make it easier to accept. I wanted to lock her away somewhere safe, somewhere no one could ever hurt her again. But that would be its own kind of prison, and Kara deserved better than that. Over the next few days, something shifted between us. The attack had stripped away the last pretense that we were just two people casually orbiting each other. We both knew what we were now. Kara knew she loved me, even though she hadn't said it. And I knew I couldn't live without her, even though I hadn't admitted it out loud. She started staying at my apartment more nights than she spent at her own place. Not because I asked her to, but because it felt natural, right? She'd show up after closing the shop with takeout or groceries, claiming my kitchen was better than hers, my shower was nicer, my TV got better reception. All lies we both pretended to believe. The truth was simpler. We needed to be near each other. In my world of violence and betrayal, she was something real and good and worth protecting. And in her world of silence and solitude, I was someone who spoke her language and made her feel seen. One night, a month after the attack, we were sitting on my couch after dinner. Kara was reading a book about floristry techniques, occasionally showing me pictures of elaborate arrangements she wanted to try. I was working on my laptop, dealing with the endless administrative tasks that came with running a criminal empire. Domestic, peaceful, surreal. She nudged me and signed, "Question, personal, okay? Always. Why never dated since sister? Died or did? You?" I closed my laptop, giving her my full attention. It was a fair question, one I'd asked myself over the years. I dated occasionally. Nothing serious. I didn't let anyone get close. Why? Because close means vulnerable, and vulnerable means they could be used against me, or hurt because of me. After Elena, I couldn't risk caring about someone again. But now, you risk with me. I don't have a choice with you. I signed it honestly, laying bare a truth I'd been avoiding. From the moment I saw you signing on my doorstep, something changed. You reminded me of Elena, yes. But you also reminded me of who I used to be before I became this. Someone who could feel things. Someone capable of more than just violence. You are more than violence. Always. Have been. My men wouldn't agree with you. Your men don't see you make breakfast or try to arrange flowers or sign love you to me when you think I'm sleeping. I froze. You saw that? She smiled, gentle and knowing. Felt it, your hands against my back, forming signs you thought I couldn't see, but I know the feel of those words now. Kara, love, you, too. She signed it clearly, no hesitation, no fear. Loved, you, for weeks, maybe, since that first night when you could have left me but didn't, when you learned language for sister and spoke it to me, when you made monster pay. I should have told her this was crazy, that loving me was dangerous, that she deserved someone normal who could give her a safe, predictable life. Instead, I pulled her close and signed against her lips. I love you. God help us both. I love you. And then I kissed her. Our first kiss, after months of circling each other, months of touch-starved glances and almost moments. It was gentle at first, cautious, both of us aware of her past trauma, both of us afraid of moving too fast. But Kara had never been one to let fear control her. She deepened the kiss, her hands moving from signing to touching, mapping the scars on my arms, the tattoos on my chest. When we finally pulled apart, we were both breathing hard. Is this okay? She signed, her hands shaking slightly. For you, for me, for us. More than okay. But Kara, we need to be careful. Your trauma is mine to manage, not yours to fix. Her hands moved firmly, certainly. Have been in therapy, have been working through it. Won't let that man take this from me, too. Then we go at your pace, always. My pace is now. And so it was. We moved to the bedroom, taking our time, learning each other's bodies with the same patience we'd learned each other's languages. Kara showed me what she needed, guided my hands with hers, stopped me when something triggered a memory and started again when she was ready. And I followed her lead, this woman who'd survived so much, and was choosing to trust me with her vulnerability. Afterward, lying tangled together in the sheets, Kara traced the scars on my shoulder, bullet wound from 5 years ago, and signed one-handed, tell me stories of these. They're not happy stories. Don't need happy, need real, need all of you, not just good parts. So I told her about the bullet wound, courtesy of a deal gone wrong in Moscow, about the knife scar on my ribs from a rival who'd gotten too close, about the burn on my left hand from a fire I'd set to cover evidence. Each scar was a story, a moment I'd survived when I probably shouldn't have. In return, she told me her stories, not physically scarred ones, but emotionally. The kids who'd mocked her in school, the family members who'd treated her deafness like a burden, the jobs she'd lost because people assumed she couldn't do them. Each story was a wound she'd survived, a moment that had made her stronger even as it hurt her. We traded scars until dawn, our hands never stopping their movement, creating a new language that was ours alone, part sign language, part touch, part understanding that went beyond words. Promise me something, she signed as the sun started to rise. Anything. Don't hide from me, not business, not danger, not your darkness, want all of you, real you. It's ugly, Kara. What I do, who I am. So is what happened to me, but you didn't run. Don't run from me either. It was the most anyone had ever asked of me. Complete honesty, total vulnerability, no masks. In my world, that kind of openness was suicide. But with Kara, it felt like survival. Okay, I promised. No more hiding. And I meant it. Starting that day, I let her see everything. I told her when I had to make difficult decisions, when I had to hurt people to maintain order, when I came home with blood on my hands even though I'd tried to wash it all away. And she listened, and accepted, and loved me anyway. She also started attending meetings with me. Not the dangerous ones, but the business ones. Legitimate fronts I ran that needed my attention. She'd sit quietly in the corner, working on flower arrangements or sketches, but her presence changed the dynamic. My associates were more careful with their language, more respectful, less likely to suggest solutions that involved unnecessary violence. Having Kara there reminded me, that there were lines we shouldn't cross. Marco, ever practical, pointed out the risk one day. You're bringing her deeper into your world, boss. Eventually, someone's going to use that against you. Let them try, I said simply. She knows the risks. She's choosing this. Who am I to tell her she can't? You're the man who loves her and should protect her, even from yourself. He wasn't wrong. But he also didn't understand what Kara had taught me, that protection without agency was just another form of prison. She needed to make her own choices, even if those choices put her in danger. All I could do was make sure she had the tools to survive those dangers. 3 months into our relationship, I took her to Elena's grave for the first time. It was a sunny Saturday, the kind of day my sister would have loved. I brought flowers. Kara had made a special arrangement of yellow roses and white lilies, Elena's favorites. Standing there, my hands moved almost automatically, signing what I'd never been able to say out loud. Elena, this is Kara. She's everything I never thought I'd have again. She speaks your language. She's strong like you were, broken and whole at the same time. I think you would have liked her. I think you would have approved. Kara, reading my signs, squeezed my hand. Then her own hands moved, signing to a woman she'd never met. Thank you for teaching him this language. Without it, we would never have found each other. Your brother talks about you all the time. You were loved, are loved, will always be loved. And I cried, actually cried, for the first time since Elena's funeral. Not silent tears, but real, gulping sobs that Kara couldn't hear but could feel as she held me. Years of grief pouring out, finally able to be released because I had someone strong enough to hold the weight of it with me. When I finally got control of myself, embarrassed, Kara signed, "Good. Needed. That. Been. Holding. It. Too. Long." "How did you know?" "Grief. Recognizes. Grief. Your sister. Shaped. You. But haunts. You. Too. Time. To. Let. Her. Rest. Time. To. Let. Yourself. Live." She was right. I'd been half alive for 15 years, going through the motions of living while staying emotionally dead. Kara had forced me back into the world of the living, made me feel things I'd thought I'd successfully buried. It was terrifying and wonderful, and I wouldn't trade it for anything. That night, in bed, I signed a question I'd been thinking about for weeks. Move in with me, officially, not just staying over. Move in. Already have, basically. Then make it real. Bring your things. Make it your home, too. Our home, she corrected. Already feels like ours. And it did. The dangerous mob boss and the deaf florist, building a life together in the spaces between violence and silence. It shouldn't have worked. By all logic, it should have been a disaster. But somehow it was the most real thing I'd ever had. The proposal came on a Tuesday night, 6 months after Kara moved in officially, a year after I'd found her bleeding on my doorstep. There was nothing traditionally romantic about it. No restaurant reservation, no hidden ring and champagne, no public declarations. Just the two of us in the kitchen, cooking dinner together the way we did most nights now. I was chopping vegetables while Kara seasoned chicken, a peaceful domestic scene that still felt surreal. My phone had been silent all evening. I'd told Marco not to disturb me unless someone was actively dying. And for a few hours, I could pretend I was just a normal man making dinner with the woman he loved. Kara nudged me and signed, "What are you thinking? You have that face." "What face?" "The one where you're planning something, but won't tell me what. I set down the knife and dried my hands, then turned to face her fully. My hands moved slowly, deliberately, forming each sign with care. I'm thinking that I never believed I could have this. A normal life. Someone to come home to. Someone who sees all of me and stays anyway. And I want to keep it. Forever. If you'll let me. I reached into my pocket and pulled out the ring I'd been carrying for 2 weeks, waiting for the right moment. It was simple. White gold with a single diamond. Elegant but not ostentatious. The inside was engraved with 3 signs. I love you. Kara's hands flew to her mouth, eyes wide. Then they dropped to sign frantically. R. You is. This. Marry me, I signed, speaking the words aloud too, even though she couldn't hear them. Not because you need my protection. Not because you owe me anything. But because I love you, and I want to spend whatever time I have left making you happy. Marry me, Kara. She stared at me for a long moment, tears streaming down her face. Then her hands moved, shaking but certain. Yes. Yes. 1,000 times. Yes. I slid the ring onto her finger and she launched herself at me, kissing me with a fierceness that spoke of all the love and fear and hope she couldn't put into words. When we finally pulled apart, both of us laughing and crying, she signed. Didn't think you were the marrying type. I wasn't until you. When did you buy this? 2 weeks ago. But I've known I wanted to marry you for months. Just took me a while to accept that I deserved to be happy. Deserve it more than you. No. We got married 3 months later, in a small ceremony that blended both our worlds in ways that shouldn't have worked, but did. Marco was my best man, standing uncomfortable in a tuxedo while keeping an eye on the exits out of habit. Kara's therapist and a few friends from her flower arranging classes attended, representing the normal life she'd built. Dr. Chen came, which felt right. He'd patched up the beginning of our story, so he should witness this middle part. The ceremony itself was conducted in both sign language and spoken English, with an interpreter making sure everyone could follow. But the vows we wrote ourselves, signing them to each other with hands that didn't shake, promising things that felt impossible and necessary at the same time. I promise to protect you without imprisoning you, I signed. I promise to love you without trying to change you, she signed back. I promise to speak your language even when silence is easier. I promise to see your darkness and love you anyway. By the end, there wasn't a dry eye in the room. Even Marco looked suspiciously emotional. When the officiant pronounced us married, I kissed Kara like I'd been waiting my whole life for permission to do so. Which, in a way, I had been. The reception was held at the club, cleaned up and decorated until it barely resembled its usual self. Kara had filled the space with flowers, thousands of them, turning the venue into a garden. She'd spent weeks on the arrangements, using the skills I'd seen her develop over our time together. Each table had a different centerpiece, each one more beautiful than the last. This is your world, she signed, looking around at my men and their wives, at the casual security measures that were second nature to us, but might have been alarming to civilians. I'm part of it now. Are you sure this is what you want? It's not too late to... Don't. She placed her hand over mine, stopping my signs. Love, you, choose, this, every day, will, keep choosing it. The first year of our marriage was an adjustment. Kara learned the subtle dangers of my world, which families were allies, which were enemies, how to read a room for threats, when to stay visible and when to disappear. I learned to let her make those choices herself, to trust that she could handle the knowledge I'd spent so long trying to keep from her. There were hard moments, nights when I came home with blood on my hands that no amount of washing could cleanse from my mind, and she'd hold me while I tried to reconcile the man I was with her with the monster I had to be for business. Days when she'd be triggered by something random, a man's cologne, a raised voice, the anniversary of her attack, and I'd feel helpless all over again, unable to fix the damage someone else had done. But there were good moments too, more of them than I'd expected. Sunday mornings making breakfast together, teaching her to shoot. She was terrible shot, but her form made me laugh. Her teaching me about flowers until I could actually help in the shop without killing everything I touched. The quiet evenings when we'd sit on the couch, her reading while I worked, our feet tangled together, existing in comfortable silence. It was during one of those quiet evenings, almost 2 years into our marriage, that Kara set down her book and signed something that stopped my heart. I'm pregnant. For a long moment, I couldn't move, couldn't think. A child. Our child. Someone else I would love beyond reason and fear losing every single day. Another vulnerability in a world that already had too many weapons to use against me. Say something. Kara signed, her face showing the first traces of fear. Please. I set down my laptop and pulled her close, signing into her hair where she couldn't see because my hands were shaking too much to control. I'm terrified. I'm going to be a terrible father. I have no idea how to do this, and I'm so happy I can barely breathe. She pulled back to see my face, reading the truth there, and smiled. Me, too. All of that, but we'll figure it out together. How far along? 3 months. Wanted to be sure before telling you. 3 months. 3 months she'd been carrying our child and managing that fear and joy alone. Why didn't you tell me sooner? Because you would have wrapped me in bubble wrap and never let me leave house. She wasn't wrong. Even now, my mind was racing through security protocols, making plans to fortify the apartment, arranging for 24/7 protection. The thought of something happening to her, to our baby, was unbearable. Can't let fear control us. Kara signed, reading my face. Baby needs parents who live, not parents who hide. She was right, but that didn't make it easier. Over the next few months, I tried to find a balance between protection and freedom, between keeping them safe and letting Kara maintain the independence she valued. It was the hardest thing I'd ever done. Harder than any negotiation, any confrontation, any kill. Marco started calling me Dad, mockingly before the baby was even born, but I could see genuine happiness in his eyes. You're going to need to make some decisions, boss, about what happens to the business when the kid comes, about whether you want them growing up in this world. I don't know, I admitted. It was the truth. I'd spent my whole adult life building this empire, and now I was considering walking away from it to give my child something better. But could I? Would my enemies let me retire peacefully? Did men like me even get to retire? I talked to Kara about it one night, laying out the options with the honesty I'd promised her. I could step back, put Marco in charge of day-to-day operations, focus on the legitimate businesses, and let the rest fade away gradually. It would take years, and there'd be risks, but it's possible. What do you want? She signed. I want our child to be proud of their father. I want to be able to answer honestly when they ask what I do. I want to go to sleep at night without wondering if tomorrow is the day someone finally succeeds in killing me. Then, do it. Step back. Will be careful. Will be smart. But give Our baby, a father, who comes home. It wasn't a guarantee. In my world, there were no guarantees, but it was a plan. And for the first time in my life, I had something worth changing for. The transition took longer than expected. I couldn't just walk away. That would show weakness. Invite attacks from rivals who thought I was vulnerable. Instead, I had to be strategic. I started delegating more, promoting trusted lieutenants, shifting focus to legitimate operations. The club became more of a real nightclub and less of a front. I sold off some of the riskier ventures, reinvested in legal businesses. Some of the old guard didn't like it. There were whispers that I'd gone soft, that marriage had weakened me. One ambitious captain named Dmitri decided to test that theory by trying to take over one of my territories without permission. I dealt with it personally, quickly, and brutally enough to remind everyone that stepping back didn't mean stepping down. Dimitri's body was never found, but his second-in-command got the message and fell back in line immediately. After that, the whispers stopped. Kara was 6 months pregnant when the real test came. Vincent Rossetti, the same arrogant grandson who'd threatened me at that meeting 2 years ago, made his move. His grandfather had died, leaving him in charge of the family, and he apparently thought that meant he could finally challenge me. He kidnapped Marco's daughter. It was a declaration of war, a direct attack meant to draw me out and prove I was vulnerable. Marco was beside himself, ready to tear the city apart brick by brick. I wanted to do the same. Marco was more than my right hand. He was my friend. And his daughter was an innocent 8-year-old who'd been at a playground when Rossetti's men took her. But I had Kara to think about now, and our unborn child. Going to war with the Rossettis would put them both at risk, would undo all the careful work I'd done to extricate myself from the worst of the violence. What will you do? Kara signed when I told her. What I have to. Marco's daughter is innocent. She doesn't deserve to be a pawn in this. Will it be dangerous? Yes. Will you come back? I looked at her. 7 months pregnant now, glowing with life. Everything good in my world concentrated in one person. And I couldn't lie. I don't know, but I have to try. I owe Marco that much. She was quiet for a long moment, her hands still. Then they moved, firm and certain. I know. You have to go, but you promised to come back to me. Don't break that promise. I'll do everything I can to keep it. Not good enough. Promise. Me, Killian. Promise. You'll come home to us. Looking into her eyes, seeing the fear she was trying to be brave about, I made a promise I had no right to make. I promise I will come home to you. The operation took 3 days to plan. I called in every favor I had, mobilized every resource at my disposal. We tracked the girl to a warehouse in Queens, unoriginal, but effective. Rossetti had her guarded by a dozen men, all armed, all on high alert. I could have gone in loud, brought overwhelming force and damned the casualties. But that would have risked the girl's life, and I'd promised Marco I'd bring her home safe. So instead, I went in quiet, with just 3 men I trusted completely. The infiltration was textbook. We'd all done this kind of work before, back when I was building my empire rather than trying to dismantle it. We took out the guards, silently, one by one, until we reached the room where they were keeping Marco's daughter. She was terrified, but unharmed. Zip-tied to a chair exactly like Ashford had been all those years ago. The symmetry wasn't lost on me. I'd started this journey to justice covered in violence, and here I was, still covered in it, still trying to protect the innocent from men who saw them as disposable. You're going to be okay, I told her, cutting her free. Your dad sent me. We're going to get you out of here. That's when Rossetti showed up. He must have been watching on cameras, waiting for me to show myself. He came through the door with 6 more men, all heavily armed, all pointing weapons at us. We were pinned down, outgunned, with a child to protect. "Killian Kane," Rossetti said, smiling like he'd already won. "Heard you'd gone soft. Guess the rumors were true if you're playing hero for a little girl." "Let her go, Vincent. Your quarrel is with me, not her." "See, that's where you're wrong. She's the quarrel. She's the message. You can't protect everyone, Kane. You think you can step back, play civilian, and we'll all just let you? You built this world. You don't get to leave it." He was right, in a way. I'd spent 15 years making myself into something feared, something powerful. And now that power had a gravity I couldn't escape, pulling in everyone around me. But looking at that little girl's terrified face, I realized something. I couldn't change the past. Couldn't undo the violence or the fear or the empire I'd built. But I could choose what happened next. I could choose to be the man Kara saw in me, rather than the monster Rossetti expected. "You're right," I said, raising my hand slowly. "I can't protect everyone. But I can protect her. Let her go, and I'll stay. No fight, no resistance. You want to make an example of someone, make it me." "Boss," one of my men started, but I cut him off with a look. Rossetti considered this, clearly not having expected me to surrender. "Your life for hers?" "My life for hers. But you let her and my men walk out of here first. Then you can do whatever you want with me." It was a calculated risk. Rossetti was arrogant and stupid, but he was also bound by certain rules. If he agreed to a deal and then broke it, he'd lose respect, lose power. His own men would see him as untrustworthy. "Fine," he said finally. "But your men leave their weapons." We did. I watched as my men and Marco's daughter walked out of that warehouse, saw her look back at me with confusion and fear. I signed to her. She'd learned basic signs to communicate with some deaf kids at her school. Tell your dad I kept my promise. Tell my wife I tried to keep mine. After they left, Rossetti's smile turned cruel. "You know I'm going to kill you anyway, right? This noble sacrifice play doesn't change that." "I know, but at least the girl is safe, and my men will tell everyone that you honored the deal, that you let them go. That'll buy you some respect, even if you don't deserve it." What happened next happened fast. Rossetti raised his gun, but before he could fire, the windows exploded inward. Smoke grenades, flashbangs, the room erupting into chaos. And then Marco was there with 20 men, moving through the smoke like avenging angels. I'd lied to Rossetti. Well, not lied exactly, but I'd left out the part where my men weren't just going to walk away. Where Marco would call in every favor, mobilize every resource, and come back with overwhelming force the moment his daughter was safe. In the confusion, I grabbed a weapon from a fallen guard and took cover. The firefight lasted maybe 2 minutes. Brutal, efficient, the kind of violence I'd hoped to leave behind but clearly hadn't escaped yet. When the smoke cleared, Rossetti was on the ground with a bullet in his chest, his men either dead or surrendering. Marco appeared at my side, his face hard. "You stupid bastard. You were really going to let him kill you. I promised I'd get your daughter back safe. And I promised Kara I'd bring you home. We both keep our promises." Rossetti was still alive, barely. I knelt beside him, and his eyes focused on me with hatred and something else. Respect, maybe, or just recognition that he'd underestimated me. "Should have. Stayed. Retired." He gasped out. "Should have left innocent children out of it," I replied. Then to Marco. "Call Chen. See if he can be saved." "Boss?" "Call him." Rossetti survived, barely. He'd spend the rest of his life in a wheelchair, paralyzed from the waist down. I made sure everyone knew I'd spared him, had him treated, sent him home to his family. It was a message. I was stepping back, but I wasn't weak. I could still be lethal when pushed. But I could also be merciful, which was something the old Killian Kane would never have been. Kara went into labor 2 weeks later, 3 weeks early, but not dangerously so. I was at the hospital, pacing like every other expectant father, when Marco found me in the waiting room. "The family's called a meeting," he said. "They want to know what happened with Rossetti. Want to know if there's going to be retaliation. A war. Tell them it's over. Rossetti overstepped, he paid for it, his family accepted the terms. No war, no retaliation. And tell them I'm officially stepping back. You're in charge of operations now." "You sure about this?" "Never been more sure of anything." He nodded slowly, then surprised me by pulling me into a brief, awkward hug. "You're going to be a good father. Better than you think." "I hope so." Our son was born at 3:47 a.m., screaming loud enough to wake the entire floor. He was perfect. Tiny and red and angry at the world, with Kara's dark hair and my eyes. The nurse placed him in my arms, and I felt every defense I'd ever built, every wall I'd erected around my heart, crumble completely. "He's beautiful," Kara signed from the bed, exhausted but radiant. "He's perfect. You're perfect." I signed one-handed, awkward with the baby in my other arm, but I needed her to understand. "Thank you. For him. For everything. For saving me. You saved me first. No, you saved yourself. You just let me help." We named him Elijah Kane. Elijah for "My God is Yahweh," a name that meant faith and hope. 2 things I'd never had before Kara. His middle name was Marco, in honor of the man who'd helped me keep my promise to come home. The first few months were chaos. Sleepless nights, endless diapers, learning to be a parent while still managing the transition away from my old life. But there were moments of pure magic, too. Watching Kara sing to Elijah in sign language, her hands forming songs he couldn't hear but could see. Teaching him baby signs before he could talk. Building a language between the 3 of us that was ours alone. On Elijah's first birthday, we had a small party at our new house. We'd moved out of the apartment to a place in Westchester with a yard and neighbors who had no idea who I was or what I'd done. Kara's friends came, Marco and his family, Dr. Chen, even a few of the guys from my old organization who'd become more friends than employees over the years. Watching Elijah smash cake all over his face while Kara laughed silently beside me, I felt something I'd never experienced before. Complete peace. Not the absence of danger. There would always be remnants of my old life that could resurface, but the presence of something stronger than fear. "Happy?" Kara signed, catching me staring. "Overwhelmed, grateful, terrified I'll mess this up somehow." "You won't. We won't. Because we have each other." She was right. Whatever came next, whatever challenges or dangers or fears, we'd face them together. The silent witness who'd brought me back to life, and the man who'd learned her language and found redemption in the spaces between words. That night, after everyone left and Elijah was asleep in his crib, I stood in his doorway watching him breathe. Kara appeared beside me, slipping her hand into mine. "Thinking. About. Elena?" She signed. "Always. But not with guilt anymore. With gratitude. She taught me the language that led me to you, and now we're teaching it to him. Her gift keeps giving. She would be proud of you, of the man you became." I hoped that was true. I'd never know for certain. But standing there with Kara beside me and our son sleeping peacefully, I felt closer to Elena than I had since her death. Not haunted by her loss, but inspired by her memory. 5 years later, I stood in the flower shop that had started everything, watching Kara teach Elijah how to arrange roses. He was chattering away in a mix of spoken words and sign language, switching between them effortlessly the way children raised bilingual often do. He'd inherited my height and Kara's grace, and his laughter, which he did both aloud and silently, depending on who he was with, was the best sound in my world. "Daddy, look," he signed and said simultaneously. "I made it myself." The arrangement was lopsided and missing half its leaves, but it was beautiful because he'd made it with pride and joy. "It's perfect," I told him. "Your mom taught you well." Kara smiled at me from across the shop, and I saw our whole journey reflected in her eyes. The fear and pain we'd started with, the trust we'd built, the love that had saved us both. Marco appeared in the doorway, now fully running the organization I'd built while I managed the legitimate businesses we'd grown. "Got a minute, boss?" I'd told him 100 times to stop calling me boss, but old habits died hard. "What's up?" "There's a situation. Nothing major, but I wanted your advice on how to handle it." We stepped outside, while Kara and Elijah continued their flower lesson. Marco explained the issue. A territorial dispute that required finesse more than force. I listened, offered suggestions, but made it clear the decision was his. "You don't miss it?" he asked when we'd finished. "The action, the power, the respect?" "Some days," I admitted. "But then I go home to them, and I remember what I have now is worth more than all of that combined." "You got soft," he said, but he was smiling. "No, I got smart. There's a difference." He left, and I returned to the shop to find Elijah showing me his arrangement again, signing excitedly about a butterfly he'd seen in the park. And I realized that this normal, mundane, beautiful life was the greatest victory I'd ever achieved. Not through violence or fear or power, but through love, spoken in the language of silence. Years later, when Elijah asked me about my past, I told him the truth. Not all of it. Some things a child should never have to carry, but enough that he understood who I'd been and why I'd changed. I told him about his Aunt Elena, about the night I met his mother, about the choices that led me from darkness into light. "Were you scared?" he asked, signing the question with his mother's grace. "Terrified. But your mom taught me that being scared doesn't mean you can't be brave, and being broken doesn't mean you can't heal." "I'm glad you found each other," he said. Then, with the pure honesty of children, "Otherwise I wouldn't be here." "Otherwise neither would I signed back. "Not really. Your mother gave me a life worth living." That night, lying in bed with Kara curled against my side, I signed into the darkness. "Do you ever regret it? Staying with me? Bringing Elijah into this complicated world?" She turned to face me, her hands visible in the moonlight streaming through the window. "Never, not once, every day, I choose, you choose, this, choose, us." "I love you," I signed, in every language, in every silence. "I know," she signed back, smiling. "You tell me every day, even when you think I'm not looking." Because that was our language now. Not just the signs we formed with our hands, but the silences we shared, the understanding that went deeper than words. We'd both been broken when we found each other. Her by violence, me by guilt and grief. But somehow, in the spaces between our scars, we'd built something beautiful. A home where silence wasn't emptiness, but fullness. A love that didn't need words to be understood. A family built on the foundation of survival, and strengthened by the choice to keep choosing each other, every single day. And as I drifted off to sleep, Kara's breathing soft against my chest, I thought about that night 3 years ago, when she'd stumbled onto my doorstep covered in blood and fear. If someone had told me then that she would save me instead of the other way around, I wouldn't have believed them. But that's exactly what happened. She'd taught me that strength wasn't about how much violence you could inflict, but how much love you could hold. That protection wasn't about building walls, but about giving someone the tools to protect themselves. That redemption wasn't something you earned through grand gestures, but through small choices made every day to be better than you were yesterday. In saving her, I'd learned how to save myself. In speaking her language, I'd found my voice. In loving her, I'd finally understood what it meant to be loved. And in the silence between our words, in the space where sign language and spoken language met and merged, we'd created something neither of us could have built alone. A life worth living, a love worth fighting for, and a home where both of us finally, truly belonged.